made me laugh. "Well then," I said, after the awkward pause dragged on too long, "we must clean up the pieces and hide them somewhere. I certainly won't report it broken." "Oh!" Gertie looked at me, her face transforming. "Are you sure, Your Highness?" I could see a new worry in the back of her eyes. This one was for me, although it was less pressing than the worry on her own behalf had been. I tried to keep my face from twisting. Even my maids knew that I never stood up to my stepmother. I forced my back to straighten, my tone strengthening. "Of course I am sure." Gertie didn't quibble further, cleaning up the mess with careful fingers, making sure not a single shard remained behind as evidence. When I tried to assist, she waved me away, so I had nothing to do but watch her wrap it in layer after layer of paper. "If anyone notices and asks," I said, "I'll tell them I broke it myself." Gertie gave me a tentative smile. "That's right kind of you, Your Highness. I'm so sorry." Her words trailed away before she seemed to grasp some courage. "I'm sorry about your father. He was a good king, and a kind man." "Yes, he was." I turned away, not willing for her to see how easily the tears welled in my eyes. "And now that he's gone, I suppose you—" This time, when her words failed, no courage came to finish the sentence. I kept my face averted, silent. I didn't need to hear the words to know what she meant to say, and the hope behind the sentiment cut at me. My father, the king, had died, and I was his only child. So didn't that make me queen? But for all her hope, I noticed she still addressed me as Your Highness, while she called my stepmother Her Majesty. And why should a lowly maid have the courage that an entire court lacked? I had barely heard much in the last week, the fog of grief cocooning me from the ordinary sounds of life. But I knew I would have noticed that. Not a single person had called me queen. A knock, followed immediately by the sound of an opening door, made me startle again. I silently berated myself. I was a princess in my own chambers. If I couldn't feel secure here, there was no place for me anywhere. A footman entered, his face impassive. Gertie stepped back, her hands tightening around the parcel she still held. But the man didn't even glance her way, his eyes on me. "Princess Blanche, Her Majesty requests your presence in the throne room." He waited, as if expecting an answer, and I wondered how he would react if I refused the request. But I shook off the thought long before the words could rise to my lips. It wasn't really a request, and I knew it. "Very well," I said at last, inclining my head. "I will be along shortly." For the first time the footman showed an emotion, brief uncertainty crossing his face. I raised a single eyebrow, and he hastily bowed and left the room. I squashed the fleeting pleasure that filled me at my small act of defiance. I was no longer a child, and such childish games were beneath me. "I must wear a state gown," I said to Gertie, and she nodded quickly, carefully depositing her burden before dashing across to my wardrobe. For a moment I considered directing her choice, but found I couldn't muster the energy to care. I would dress properly in respect for my father and defiance of my stepmother. But I couldn't bring myself to have an opinion on the dress itself. In all too short a time I faced the long corridor to the throne room. Our castle was old, the dark grey stone worn from the passage of so many years. I had always found it comforting. An old friend, even if it was less beautiful than the palaces of some of my friends. But in the last week it had turned hard and cold. I felt the weight of it pressing down on me, the stone cold and unrelenting. I shivered. A flicker of movement to one side caught my attention, and a tall man stepped into the corridor ahead of me. I called a glad welcome and hurried my steps, but he didn't meet my eyes. Instead, he dropped to one knee.